أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمخلوقين نبينا وسيدنا وشفينا أبو القاسم محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أما بعد قال الله في كتابه المبين وهو أصدق الصادقين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل السافلين. Sisters and brothers, I'm trying to follow the difficult follow-up to Sheikh Ali Raza and Sister Nazmina to build on their theme of godliness and goodliness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ayahs which I have recited says that I have created mankind to be the best of the best, ahsana taqweem. But the same mankind has the potential to become the worst of the worst, to sink to the lowest of the low, asfal as-safili. And we see here in the events which we will relate over the next 5 nights, both characters of man, being the best and being the worst. For that is what brings the tension in the society, and that is what we want to dig out to see if we can explain somehow how people who say we are going to offer our prayers and then kill the grandson of the Prophet, what kind of rationalization have they got? If you think that this is in the past, we have tales of things happening today which are quite strange. For example, I have a relative in Karachi. They said that some burglars came to their home and they said, okay, it's time for Maghrib, we will pray Maghrib and then burgle you. You see the perverted logic of people who apparently want to be believers, but their actions tell us otherwise. So what we want to do, inshallah, in this 5 sessions which we have got until Tuesday evening, is to try and see if we can trace what has been the impact of the events of Karbala onto the Muslim community and the development of the followers of Ahlul Bayt altogether. We have some very, I would say, comfortable ideas which need to be dispelled. We think that by sacrificing his life, Imam Hussein solved the whole problem of Islam and everything is okay now. We don't need to do anything. As we will see, this is not the case. The lesson of Karbala is much different and deeper than a simple argument that it establishes Islam for all time. I'm going to dig at it a little bit more. Just to recap that last year, in the 2 or 3 sessions which I did, we looked at events before Karbala, which helped to shape Karbala. And some of the personalities who were involved in that are also central to events post-Karbala. So we will need to recount some of them and see how the same agenda was being carried on post-Karbala. And one of the persons tried to put a kind of if you like, genealogy there. One of the persons is a man called Marwan bin Hakam. So you will see in the third row there, Al-Hakam, and then his son, Marwan. He was also one of the key players at the time of the third caliph. He was his confidant, and by common consent, it was this man who actually was instrumental in making a mess of the whole of Islam. But he was still, we will find him in Damascus, and later on as caliph, and his son continuing as caliph. So we will see that how those discourses of last time, and when we will put these together with these 5, inshallah, it will form a continuing narrative of these Karbala events. So what we want to do in these 5 sessions is that today we want to look at some ways and methods of interrogating history, because I will show you that what comes as history is not necessarily what happened. And then we will look at the events immediately following the martyrdom of Imam Hussein and the rise of the Tawwabun and Mukhtar and so on. That is our agenda for today. Tomorrow we will move on from there and see the emergence of the Abbasids and other groupings who took control of large parts of the Ummah, but again betrayed the Ahlul Bayt. On Saturday, we will begin to look at the on Sunday, sorry. No, Saturday I'm not. Saturday our colleague and Sheikh from the Haram Mosque will come and talk. On Sunday, we will look at the rise of the Safavids in Iran and the establishment of Shiism in Iran. On Sunday, we'll begin to look at India and the contribution of Indian Shiis to the development of Shiism in Iraq. This is something which is not appreciated by many people. And those of you who have been and are from Iraq will know things like the Nahr al-Hindiya and so on. These have been instrumental in many ways, and we will examine them and see how they have shaped the Shi'i narrative in Iraq. And finally, on Tuesday, we will look at contemporary events and how Karbala features in them. So it's a very full agenda, inshallah, and brings us from those times to the present day, or more or less. Because as you will see, a couple of events just this last few months show you that this is a very live narrative, if you like. For example, take the case of the respected companion of the Prophet, Hujr bin Adi. This is a person who 10 years after the martyrdom of Imam Ali was arrested by Muawiyah and required to toe the line and condemn Imam Ali in public and in his prayers. When he refused, he was martyred. Okay, that is then. 3 months ago, you saw that his shrine was desecrated by this ISIS type of fellows in Damascus. So the enmity of Hujr bin Adi still is there. What was his crime? Not to condemn Imam Ali in public. So the narrative is very live, it's not gone. Or today, I get an email one of the more common circulation mails of the true significance of Ashura. It goes on and on about Musa and Isa and all kinds of prophets and what happened on Ashura to them, and we should fast and whatever, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But then it says in one paragraph, which is very, very disturbing, it says, we live in times where the excesses of the heretics have obscured the true significance of Muharram in general and Ashura in particular. Collective self-harm in full view of bewildered public has no basis in the Sharia and contradicts sound intellect and resembles the practice of Jahiliyyah. This is referring to us. And this is today. So, we're looking at a very live narrative which we will deal with in our last lecture, but we need to first lay the basis of how this kind of ideas can still stay potent. So to start with, let us look at the time just before Karbala in Kufa. We hear that despite their very, if you like, open support for Imam Hussain alayhi salam to come to Kufa and act as their leader, eventually the number of people who actually continued on the path became fewer and fewer until, of course, Muslim was martyred and the Imam himself was hounded and then martyred. And we saw last time that a lot of that was because of the spread of fear and information or secret services and so on and so forth. So many people succumb to fear, some fear succumb to greed, some succumb to bribery, some succumb to all kinds of things, and eventually it perished. In that situation, we also see that the immediate result of the massacre of Karbala was nearly zero. Nothing happened. In fact, when we hear of what happened in Damascus to the prisoners, like the family of Imam Hussain and Imam Zain al-Abidin brought, nobody even blinked. It's fine. Did they believe that this was okay, or did they know what was happening? Or was there fear not to do anything? Or was there misinformation to bring this situation about? It was only what I would call, I've mentioned this before, a stroke of genius on the part of Imam Zain al-Abidin to see how to break this siege on information. So he started this tradition of mourning for his own family. Very few tyrants could now stop it. He said, I'm just mourning for my family. What's your problem? And the mourning took the form of recounting the events of Karbala. And in smaller circles, this recounting slowly made the whole tragedy public and live. Of course, this is in terms of social media today, a very viral form, but it is slower than social media, right? It takes time to work its way through. So this is the origin of these kind of commemorations we have, and it was really fit for that time. There was no other way to break that siege. As you can see, as I told you before, that even 10 years after the martyrdom of Imam Ali alayhi salam, condemning Imam Ali in Azan became mandatory. And if you did not, it was punishable by death, as Hajar bin Adi and his companions paid for their lives on that. So if you have condemning of Imam Ali alayhi salam from the mimbar and in azan, then obviously the conditioning people's minds are made up as to, that's fine, I think this is what Islam is today. And that was how it was being manipulated. If we think that this is not possible, now let us look at today. We have these revelations by Edward Snowden and Julian Assange and so on, which show you that every conversation or everything you have is being monitored and manipulated. Now, if you understand what is happening, what are you going to do? Are you going to put what you feel, exactly what you feel on the thing? Or are you going to put what you think they should know what I feel? So it colors your whole behavior. And I was, about 10 years ago, we were discussing this issue, before, of course, all these things had emerged, with an Irish professor. This was at the Muslim Council of Britain. And the Irish professor told me, she said, look, do you know something? For 30 years, we, the Irish, we never said what we believed in public to anybody. We always said what we thought they want to know what we believe. Because the police state is so tough that you will lay yourself open to danger. And she said, you should take a lesson from that. Do not be so naive as to say that you can say anything and everything. Be careful. And now we can see with these revelations that that is so. However, so 50 years from today, if somebody wants to come and examine the history of what happened today, they would find a lot of things. But those would be all wishful thinking as to what we wanted people to believe rather than what we believed. So you can see that in a climate of fear, that is what happens. And that is exactly the speciality of Muawiyah. And that was indeed one of the key ways in which Saddam Hussein also perpetuated his power. To create that fear that you would not say what you believe. That makes us think that the history which we have received from different parts needs to be interrogated in a much more different way because it's very conditioned. It depends on where and how we were talking. You saw 2 weeks ago when Sheikh Bamanpur was here talking on Mubahala, and he was saying that the incident, the event of Mubahala, which is, according to Tabari, accepted by all people, has been recounted in so many different ways by different people. Some people eliminating Imam Ali from it altogether, some people de-emphasizing Imam Ali, and so on and so forth, according to what they thought should be said. So even like an incident like Mubahala cannot be reported, which is something quite straightforward, then these kind of things have a bigger problem. So we need to interrogate history in a different way to get clues out of it, to see if we can find actually what happened. The other one is that sometimes even when we look at something, our reporting of it is conditioned by what we believe or what we think we believe. And I want to give you 2 examples which are very relevant to us and also very suggestive of what can happen. We were in Hajj, and at that time the late Atla Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Fadlallah used to come to Hajj, so we went to see him. And one of my friends said, let's go, we want to have a meeting with him, we want to ask him some questions. And we took one of our Iraqi brothers as an interpreter. So we went there. And he said, I want to ask you a question, Sayyidina. I said, fine, of course, no problem. He said, is music allowed or not? Very straightforward, nothing, no ifs and buts. Sayyid Allah said, in principle, there is no problem. And the translator, he says, the Sayyid says, if it is with strings, it is not allowed. I said to him, yeah, what are you talking about? The Sayyid hasn't said that. Ask him again. So I asked him again, he said the same thing. So we went out, and the two of them are discussing. He said, you see, the Sayyid agreed with us that if it is with strings, it is not allowed. Now, you can see that this will be reported in that format. You don't know what exactly the Sayyid said because you can't get at it. Because the person who is interpreting it through his own background. Another example, we were in Jamaran. At that time, they had invited a lot of people to come and have an audience with Imam Khomeini. Jamaran was his residence in north of Tehran. And those of you who have seen on TV and others, there is a floor like this, and then there was a platform, and Imam Khomeini used to come on the platform and sit there and address the gathering. So you would have a platform here, right? So we had some of our senior brothers from East Africa with us, and we went there. And after the Imam entered and sat down, there was an orchestra in the back which played a full symphony. The question is, we asked after later on when we finished, we went out, I asked them, is this allowed or not? They said, no, it's not allowed. I said, what do you mean? He said, no, this is actually forced on Imam Khomeini. I said, look, I mean, it's not before he came. He came, he sat down, he signaled to them to start. So what are you talking about? But even to this day, I rechecked about a year ago, the people believe still that it was not proper. So this just shows you that what we see or what we hear later is filtered through lenses which are quite different. And sometimes they may be forced lenses, sometimes they may be forced narratives, and so on. Let me give you one more example to just push it home. Sometimes you can interrogate history to see. In the 1970s, when we came here early on, I went to Dublin once. And at Dublin airport, every taxi was 7-seater. Obviously, birth control not being allowed in Catholicism and so on. So people had large families, which is fine. 5 years ago, I went to Dublin. There was not a single 7-seater. So I asked a number of people there. I said, have you started practicing birth control? He said, no, we are Catholics, we cannot do it. I said, but the evidence is quite contrary to what you are saying. I can see, just from 20 years, 30 years, that things have changed radically. So you see, sometimes you have to interrogate history through observation to say, actually, what is happening, what people are saying is not actually what's happening. So you have to understand that somehow they have rationalized the practice of birth control and done something. Okay? So, with these preliminaries, let's get a little bit into our subject, because we will use a lot of these techniques to interrogate that history itself. Two things come to our mind very, very readily, and they really go against the grain of what we think. With the martyrdom of every Imam, the number of followers of the Ahlul Bayt have fallen, have decreased, not increased. So by the time of the 11th Imam, it was so beleaguered that there was only a handful of declared followers. So if we say that Imam Hussain solved the problem, it should have been the other way, right? But it was going, in actual number terms, it was going this way. The second one is that a lot of the dissension, disagreement came from within the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, not from outside. So we saw last time that the first, for example, problem in Siffin to Imam Ali came from the Khawarij. These were not outsiders, these were followers of Imam Ali. They said, we do not accept your judgment, and we consider you to be outside the fold of Islam because you did 1, 2, 3. Similarly, after Imam Hussain, as we saw, there was a very dense network of informants, spies, this and that, to control the whole situation, and public condemnation of Imam Ali and so on started. Now people, Kufans mostly, some others who had started to think over, some of them obviously were feeling sad, some of them were feeling that they had betrayed the Imam, because Kufa was obviously the place where the followers of Ahlul Bayt were concentrated at that time, and little pockets in Medina and Makkah, but basically it was Kufa. Even with that, it took them between 2 and 3 years to organize some kind of a movement to see that we will challenge the Umayyads. And what you hear in the Maktal, I think you heard on the first day or second day, a name of Suleiman ibn Surad. Suleiman ibn Surad was known as the Sheikh of Shia, the leader of the Shia of Kufa. And he was the person around whom these people rallied. Eventually, he was able to collect 3,000 people, and they came to be known as the Tawwabun, the people who want to repent, to make Tawbah. And they were mobilizing to go and confront the Umayyads. We will see tomorrow that parallel to this, you must see that I think 2 years after Karbala, Yazid himself died. Then he was succeeded briefly by his son, and who couldn't manage, and then it was Marwan, and then Abdul Malik bin Marwan, which we will see tomorrow, inshallah. But when they were about to go and confront the Umayyads, another person appeared called Mukhtar as-Saqafi. He said, I want to mobilize the followers of Ahlul Bayt in the name of Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, who is a son of Imam Ali alayhi salam, because he is the true leader. So he divided the ranks. Those poor people went. By the time they reached their point of confrontation, they had dwindled to 1,000 and they were massacred by the Umayyad armies. Then Mukhtar took the baton and he challenged, he went there, confronted, and for a little while succeeded to some extent in establishing control in Kufa. Of course, Mukhtar himself is controversial because of a number of issues which are relevant to us. One is obviously ignoring the imamat of Imam Zain al-Abidin and promoting Muhammad ibn Hanafiya. And secondly, perhaps conducting some indiscriminate massacres of people. Some of them obviously participated in Karbala, others were just bystanders, and so on. And eventually, of course, he was also defeated by Abdullah ibn Zubair, which we will see tomorrow, from Medina. But started to promote an idea that Muhammad ibn Hanafiya had not died, but had gone into the Ghaiba, and he was the Mahdi. These are not outsiders. These are insiders. These are believers. These are lovers of Ahlul Bayt. And they came and created this dissension. We are looking at 3 to 5 years of Karbala. So, if the message of Karbala is, we say, to be so clear and sharp, then this could not have happened. Look at the position of Imam Zain al-Abidin himself. Imam Zain al-Abidin did not support either the Tawwabun or Mukhtar. I said, this is not the time to take up battle in this way. We need to find another way. As I said, he had already instituted other things. Now, if you think that this history is still raw, let's interrogate it a bit more. We see that after Karbala, the family of the Prophet were taken as captives to Damascus, and then eventually they were released and they came back to Medina. And then we find that where is the grave of Zainab Salaam alayhi? We don't know. A large number of people think it is Damascus, where the shrine is today. Why did she go to Damascus? After having suffered what she did in Damascus, why did she go to Damascus again? Some people say she's buried in Egypt. Some people say we don't know. So even a basic thing like that, we don't have historic narrative to tell us what happened. That period's narrative has been seriously compromised by all these kinds of information control, fear and terror, and building an alternative narrative which delves into demonizing Imam Ali. Because if you see from this line, the problem is that the Banu Umayyah, they thought of themselves as the leading tribe of Quraysh. So they were in charge of Makkah. Now suddenly they find a prophet emerging from the line of Hashim. And then, of course, Imam Ali down there. This is a big challenge. On his conversion, Abu Sufyan in Makkah, obviously after the conquest of Makkah, he converted. He said, today we have lost to our lower cousins, but we will get it back. And that is what they proceeded to do, to establish a Umayyad Khilafat with the help of Marwan and Muawiyah and so on. So, inshallah, I think I've laid the grounds today for us to see what ways to look at history and how to begin to understand the message of Imam Hussein and the Ahlul Bayt. And tomorrow we'll move to more substantive issues. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We have time for questions from either side. Should we start with the sister side if there are any questions? Or you clear on the brother side?
Thank you for your talk. I just wanted to ask about the role of al-Mukhtar. I was under the impression, I think we'd had a previous talk here as well at Mahfil, that there was a lot of dispute as to the role of Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya and al-Mukhtar, and whether a lot of this was propaganda, whether it's true, how much of it was real, in terms of how they presented the revolution or the movement, and the role of Imam Zain al-Abidin and him not wanting to declare his actual active role but wanting to look passive, therefore putting forward the position of Muhammad ibn Hanafiya so that the imamate itself wouldn't get attacked in such a vulnerable time when he was under virtual house arrest. So I'm just wondering if it was a bit more complex than Mukhtar presenting.
It can be as complex as you want to make it. But as I think you're referring to a talk given by Sister Amina in-laws on this, yeah? And if you remember, we interrogated her at that time that this is trying to build a defensive wall around something which is not defensible. I think the majority of, if you like, people who have reflected on it, because the sources are not very, they couldn't support either argument. And then if you go to the argument that the sources themselves could not say what they wanted to say, then you can build any argument onto it, right? But the majority tend to support that this is a very controversial time. And you see, even later, when you see the claim of Muhammad ibn Hanafiya staying intact, even after he was gone, you see that perhaps there is something there which needs to be factored in, right? But what I'm trying to say is that regardless whether it is right or wrong, I'm saying that the kind of responses which emerged out of Karbala had a number of motives, not purely the defense of the Ahlul Bayt. Like later on, tomorrow we'll see, for example, the Abbasids. They came in this line and then they proceeded to become even more cruel than the Umayyads, really, as far as the Ahlul Bayt are concerned.
Thank you for the very informative talk. I had a question, comment on this. We know something happened when we've experienced it, so when we've been in the moment. And after it has happened, it's only a memory in our minds. So we will never be really able to tell what really truly happened within Karbala or afterwards. How do you distinguish? How do you find out which source is the true source? And how do you find out if something is not an agenda? Because everything has a motive, every channel has a motive and a bias, and everybody comes from a perspective where they're trying to support their point of view, because naturally everybody has a bias towards what supports their point of view, even when they report things, and even when they're trying to be objective, and even when they're faced with both the pros and the cons.
Yeah, so you're absolutely correct. This is exactly what I'm trying to deal with here, that the sources are, well, certainly not accurate, but reflect also different people's understanding, that's fine, background, that's fine. But now here we have an additional element. They also reflect the kind of fear that what you can say and not say, right? So it's a very, very mixed bag of information. Now, for example, if you look at the main source of the events of Karbala itself, it's centered around the work of Abu Mikhnaf and his Maqtal, right? It is just possible. It is not necessarily the best kind of reporting, right? And some things there are definitely questionable. But it is the best we have. This is not a follower of Ahlul Bayt. He's probably not on the other side, but he's somebody who is in between. So that itself colors the narrative, and then it has been passed on by different sources and so on. So if you look at the authenticity of that narrative, it's questionable. Later on, lots of other communities, this is what we want to see in the third lecture, have built their own narrative on what happened. And they have added all kinds of things to the narrative of Karbala, which take you to, all kinds of things which may or may not have happened, or is just part of the imagination. So this is very challenging. This is what I'm saying. Now we need to go into interrogating history by the kind of small snippets which you can get, like I said, like Hujr ibn Adi, right? When you see that 10 years after the martyrdom of Imam Ali, the man is executed for not condemning Imam Ali in public. And you say, what does that tell me about that society? Then you understand what's happening. So we want to dig out some of these things across history, inshallah, in the next 4 or 5 days, to see if we can get to some level of comfort of the narrative.